We have a lot to update you on. Vital new information came out at yesterday's hearing on the defense motions in the Karen Reed-John O'Keefe case. And I have a new theory to run by you. This was a theory I put together in notes a few days ago, but yesterday the defense revealed they're thinking something similar. Whether you're in the Karen Reed did it camp or in the Karen Reed was framed by a conspiracy camp, I've got interesting analysis for you. Among the new things we learned yesterday, there's a disturbing and mysterious 2-minute gap in the surveillance from the town library during the period that Reed would have driven by it on her way home, either with a broken taillight or one that was still intact. Also, there's specific data from Reed's SUV that should give us more precise times and locations of the vehicle, but so far the state still refuses to hand over the data. And some unusual evidence was found on Reed's bumper. And we now know exactly what time Reed got home, which gives us a much better idea what time she left the house on Fairview. And that time does not match Jennifer McCabe's testimony. Finally, we'll take another look at Turtle Boy, who now plays a central role in this whole drama. Let's get to it. I want to focus for a moment on one snapshot in time during the events surrounding O'Keefe's death, 12:29 a.m. At 12:29, Jennifer McCabe called John O'Keefe. He accepted the call, but for only 8 seconds. At 12:32, the health app on O'Keefe's phone indicates he stopped moving for the final time. So where was he when that call was accepted? Why did the call only connect for 8 seconds? Was it O'Keefe or someone else that accepted the call? How those questions are resolved has everything to say about whether Karen Reed is guilty or being framed by a conspiracy that's shocking in its scope. At the moment, we have 3 ways to establish times and locations. There should be more, and at some point there will be, but for now, it's just these 3. And all of them come from O'Keefe's phone. First, we have the pinging data. Cell towers ping phones at regular intervals. Then we have data from a health app on his phone which tracked his location and movements. Third, we have his texts, calls, and messages. The defense has a forensics analysis from Jennifer McCabe's phone, but I'm not sure that adds anything to our timeline understanding. Also, for some reason, it seems the defense does not have the data from Reed's phone, or if they do, we haven't heard anything about it. The data we do have is not precise. Both the health app and the cell tower pinging work in snapshots that look like they come every few minutes. Both sides will present experts to sort through all this data at trial, and it should be really interesting. For now, there are disputes and timelines between the defense and the prosecution. But we do know Reed and O'Keefe drove by the library at 12:16. They arrived at the house around 12:20. O'Keefe's health app supposedly shows him walking 87 meters by 12:24. The prosecution is trying to create doubt about that data, implying that the defense is confusing walking with driving. Is that possible? I think actually it is. It looks like the app gives distance traveled and elevation changes at intervals of time and location. It seems the defense has put its own interpretation on this data. So I don't think we can take at face value the claim that O'Keefe got out and walked 87 meters or ascended and descended 3 floors. I think that's a defense interpretation of the data, and we should be cautious about it. But the prosecution also showed that it simply can't be taken seriously. They think we're idiots because they actually made the argument that the app data is unreliable since it showed O'Keefe moving after he was declared dead at the hospital. Man, when I see a public official resorting to nonsense like that, I not only become skeptical, I become angry. That prosecutor knows full well it's O'Keefe's phone that was moving after he was pronounced dead, not O'Keefe. So why make that ludicrous argument? When someone resorts to deception, they only do so because they have to, because the actual data doesn't support them. I can't tell you whether the app data shows O'Keefe walked 87 meters or drove it, but I can tell you the prosecution is resorting to deception that is so lame it smacks of desperation, which has me at least leaning towards the conclusion that O'Keefe walked 87 meters. Okay, so let's contrast the positions of the prosecution and the defense. The defense says the app shows O'Keefe, at the very least, walked to the house and likely went inside. The prosecution is saying he stayed in the car with Karen for several minutes, perhaps arguing, and finally got out, and that's when Reed struck him with the SUV. So let's go back to McCabe's 12:29 call that O'Keefe accepted for 8 seconds. In the prosecution scenario, he was either still inside the SUV or just outside it. Why would he hang up after 8 seconds? Or did the call disconnect for technical reasons? He didn't call her back, and she didn't call him back either, though she did text him at 12:31 wondering where he was. That seems like a plausible sequence from McCabe's perspective. She calls, he hangs up for some reason, and a minute or two later, she texts. To be fair, that fits a Karen Reed is guilty narrative. Now, let's play it out from the O'Keefe was in the house angle. If there had been a fight inside, as the defense proposes, it would probably be over by this point. O'Keefe would be unconscious and near death. Maybe his phone came out during the fight, or maybe they just wanted to find it within his clothing, so they had McCabe ring it. Whoever grabbed it accidentally accepted the call. Then they hang up. We'll come back to this. We learned yesterday exactly what time Reed got home, 12:41. We know this because she called O'Keefe from his garage at that time. The garage door was still closing, and her high heels were clip-clopping on the floor, and they're heard on the message that she left him. She calls him 6 times between 12:41 and 12:50. Then not again until 5:04 a.m. So exactly what time did she drive away from the house on Fairview? We don't know. Hopefully more accurate data will come from the car and her phone, but so far the prosecutors have not given this to the defense yet, and to my knowledge have not put any information from that in their charging documents. So let's say it takes somewhere between 5 and 8 minutes to drive the 3 miles from the house on Fairview to the O'Keefe home. O'Keefe stopped moving at 12:32. So that matches fairly well with the prosecution scenario of Reed striking O'Keefe and then leaving the scene. Why the 6 calls when she got home? The prosecution will suggest she was either covering her trail or that she didn't realize that she had hit him. Let's pause the timeline discussion for a second to talk about the library surveillance video. This video should be able to tell us if the taillight was broken or not when Reed returned home to the O'Keefe residence. If the taillight was still intact, the prosecution case not only completely falls apart, but it shows there was an elaborate conspiracy that included planting evidence. This part of the argument in court yesterday was the most fascinating to me. Stunning, actually. The defense complained that the 2 minutes during which Reed drove home is missing from the footage. A 2-minute gap from 12:37 to 12:39. The surveillance video did pick up the SUV at 12:16 on the way to Fairview. It picked up Reed a little after 5 a.m. going to McCabe's, but it mysteriously didn't pick her up going home. The defense describes it as a 2-minute gap. I was on the edge of my seat watching to see what the prosecutor's reply would be. If you weren't watching closely, you might not catch how explosive it was. He explained that the IT person from the town of Canton put the footage in a digital file and gave the state a link to it, and the state sent that link to the defense. There was some problem later with getting that link to work, but the state also sent the defense a copy of the video, which was supposedly the exact same thing. And within that video is the mysterious 2-minute gap. So the state's position seems to be this. We both have the same video, and if there's a weird 2-minute gap at exactly the time Karen would have been driving through, we didn't have anything to do with it, and we're not interested in learning why there's a gap. I'll link to the court hearing below. You listen and you tell me what you think. The prosecution's reply comes about 12 and a half minutes into it. I've listened to it several times, and to me, it sounds like the prosecution is saying, well, if there is an inexplicable gap, don't look at us. That's freaking explosive. Look, at this point, we haven't seen the video ourselves. It's the defense team that describes this as a gap from 12:37 to 12:39. I presume there's a running clock within the footage. Does it really show those 2 minutes missing? We'll find out. But the prosecution didn't dispute the defense's description of this as a gap. If no other explanation comes forth, that's a bombshell of bombshells. The shot heard round the world was fired in Lexington, Mass. in 1775. This will be another shot heard round the world, or at least around the Netflix world. Nothing more was said on it by either side, though. To me, I think the defense would hammer this and call for a criminal investigation into what happened to that evidence, to that 2 minutes. As friend of the channel, Tom Fleming says, you have to wait till the dust settles and all the evidence is in. Shout out to Tom, who has the humor of Turtle Boy, but who is more cautious. While I'm doing shout outs, another friend of the channel told me an interesting story the other day about cops and taillights. This is Dave, not going to say his last name this time, but you regulars at the channel know who he is. He was in federal law enforcement and did a lot of undercover work and drug interdiction work. He told me about a trick they used when tailing vehicles. Say that they're watching a stash house and there's someone in the house who they want to tail. The trick is this. You walk by the car and poke a hole in the taillight with a Phillips head screwdriver. It's a small hole, so it'll go unnoticed by the driver if he walks past. However, once he's on the road, if he gets into traffic, that hole makes it much easier for the agents to spot that car from a distance. The taillight with the hole stands out. That's probably not a factor in the Reed case, but police do seem to have a sordid history of playing with taillights. If you look at your taillight and find a hole, they're onto you, buddy. All right, let's get back to our timeline discussion. O'Keefe stopped moving at 12:32. Reed got home at 12:41. McCabe texted O'Keefe at 12:31, at 12:40, and at 12:45. Her testimony is she saw Reed drive away at the time of the last text. I think her husband's testimony is actually similar. We have to be careful here. The grand jury testimony is not public. All we have are snippets referred to by one side or the other. Maybe some part of what we've heard is wrong. Maybe the McCabe's memory is faulty. But there's no way Reed left at 12:45 or at 12:40. She got home at 12:41, and it's at least a 5-minute drive. So it's hard to understand McCabe's 12:45 text if it's not in the context of her doing it as she watches Reed drive away. But Reed drove away 10 minutes earlier. So it makes McCabe's text and her later testimony a little suspect. Okay, let's float my new theory. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. So assuming O'Keefe did go inside the house and was beat up and bitten by a dog, now the killers have a problem. O'Keefe is dying. What are the options? What are the options, forgetting about morality, but strictly from the scheming, self-interested side? Well, the best option is to call an ambulance and hope he lives. No murder charges if no one dies. All the witnesses are on your side, so whatever O'Keefe says when he wakes up, you could just get everybody to say that he started the fight. However, if you feel sure he's going to die, you might discuss ways to make it seem like he never entered the house. For example, say someone smashed him on the back of the head inside the house with a blunt object, and that's how he died. Might be hard to claim self-defense considering he was by himself and unarmed, and you had several cops on your side. So you decide to move the body out and say he never came into the house. But there's a problem. Reed is still sitting out there waiting. And you're a cop, so you're well aware that cell phone pinging is used to track people. You've been a part of many investigations where that's used. You know the pinging does not determine a precise location or an exact time. It's approximate. But if you want to argue he never came inside the house, you better get that phone out. You can't bring O'Keefe out while Reed is sitting there in the car. So how can you make it seem like O'Keefe is outside, near Reed's SUV? Throw the phone into the yard near it. So at 12:29, you have McCabe call O'Keefe to find his phone. Whoever finds the phone accidentally accepts the call, then quickly hangs up. You take the phone and you quietly exit the house. Reed has her interior light on, as Ryan Nagel testifies, so you can see her quite well. She's sitting with her hands on the wheel, looking forward. She's parked on the edge of your property near the flagpole, facing away, so she won't see the door open. You sneak out and toss the phone into the yard near her SUV. This is at exactly 12:32, the last movement of that phone until after 6 a.m. Now you wait for her to leave. When she does, you carry O'Keefe out and drop him on his phone, which is how O'Keefe was found, lying on his phone in the snow on the lawn. You see, at this point, you're not thinking about framing Reed. Your plan is more simple. You'll say O'Keefe never came into the house, so whatever happened to him outside, you have no idea. You didn't see who attacked him. Will people suspect someone from the house did it? Yeah, of course they will, but they'll never be able to prove who did it, and that's enough. You have a lot of friends on the force, so they won't inspect the house. They can argue there was no probable cause since he never went inside. It's not a great plan, but it's not easy to cover up an unplanned murder. This isn't Professor Moriarty and Sherlock Holmes. Yesterday, the prosecution hinted at something similar as a way of suggesting that not everyone in the house was in on the conspiracy. They proposed that the killing was in the basement and not everyone was down there. After the guests left at 1:30, the killers carried the body outside. The defense team didn't mention the phone, but that's the theory I've been working on for a few days, and it sounds similar to what they got going. I don't know. What do you guys think? Does it sound plausible? We also learned yesterday that the prosecution has failed to provide the defense data from Karen's SUV. I think this was from the black box and the entertainment system. Another curious thing was revealed, and this maybe supports the Karen did it crowd, but it also portrays something really hard to imagine. The state says they found pieces of cocktail glass on Reed's bumper and a human hair. You may remember a broken cocktail glass was found at the scene. The prosecution theory maybe is that O'Keefe took a drink with him from the bar. He stayed in the car with Karen for about 10 minutes after they arrived. Maybe they were arguing. Then he finally gets out holding the glass, and that's when Reed backs up into him while performing an unnecessary three-point turn. A turn, by the way, which conflicts with what the McCabe's say they saw. No one ever actually saw her put the car in reverse. But somehow the SUV backed into O'Keefe with enough force to launch him onto the lawn. Somehow it struck him in the back of the head and weirdly broke the glass he was holding in a way that shards got on the bumper. No tire tracks were apparently left on the lawn. Or maybe the prosecution theory is that Reed had the cocktail glass. As O'Keefe was getting out of the car, she struck him on the back of the head with the glass. It left a pretty deep wound as seen in the autopsy, and it perhaps left shards of glass on his head, which ended up on the bumper. O'Keefe continued to get out of the car, and then she backed into him, somehow hitting him in the head, despite the fact that he's 6'2". This broke bones in his skull and resulted in shards of glass and a hair ending up on the bumper. As far as I know, no shards were found on his head. But hey, you explain what the prosecution thinks happened. The prosecution hasn't been as specific as I just was, but that seems to be where they're going. So I'd say there's evidence to support both sides of the debate, which means it will all come down to McCabe's purported 2:27 a.m. search of how long to die in the cold. The prosecution says it never happened, that she only made these searches a little after 6 a.m., weirdly, while CPR was being performed on O'Keefe on the lawn. But if the forensics data expert hired by the defense is correct, then there's no way McCabe is innocent. It means she knew O'Keefe was out there gravely injured from having been beat up inside the house. Another way the conspiracy could be exposed is if DNA comes back from the clothing or from O'Keefe's body that shows, for instance, DNA from someone else that was in the house or from the dog. Those would be things that would establish that he went into the house. Finally, let's get to Turtle Boy. As with all things, I want to be objective. I'm new to watching his channel, but I like it. I find him amusing and entertaining. And I do think his brand of journalism is really necessary in the present era of slanted and controlled and one-sided narratives. My only objection is that I fear he might lose his own objectivity as he's become more than someone just reporting on events. He now plays a central role in the drama, one which he clearly relishes, which I admit is infectious and fun to watch. But the guy who covered sports has grown into a journalist who has broken a lot of big stories, and we wanted to keep breaking big stories. We need him to. So his credibility matters. Hopefully he keeps that in mind, which gets harder to do once you become a part of events. Thanks, guys. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, that means you fell asleep, and my voice is now reaching you subliminally. I'm in your head. Wow, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. Stuff you don't even know about. I better get out so I don't disturb something. But before I do, I want to leave these instructions. When you wake up, you will hit subscribe and notify. And get something to eat. I see a lot of cravings in here. Peace.